the most important skill to master in life is to develop a positive relationship to suffering. If you fall in love with suffering, or as I like to say, to suffer well, you will not only be able to handle life when it punches you hard in the face, you will also be able to enjoy the journey on whatever worthy struggle you are pursuing. You know, you've built a business. It wasn't easy. Raising a family, writing a book, running ultramarathons, whatever the worthy endeavor in life, it's going to be hard. But if you fall in love with suffering, you'll be able to enjoy the ride. And it's not inherently pleasant. It's not. That's the nature of suffering. It fucking sucks. Yeah. But embrace that. And that comes with practice.
All right, everybody. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to be talking about fear, suffering, and pain. That's right. Fear, suffering, and pain with an absolute expert who has not just written an insanely awesome book about it called Fearvana, but someone who's actually gone to the depths of suffering to find the gift and the growth out of it. I just made that up. Does it sound good? Look, my guest today is awesome. And I'm going to tell you a story about how I met him. But first, really importantly, you know about the free resources. I tell you every week, we just hit over 300 members in the mental purpose community on Facebook. It is growing like crazy. You want to get in now. I'm telling you, this episode is coming out the week before Thanksgiving. I think it's about a week before Thanksgiving. We are about to launch, if Aaron and I just didn't pull the trigger already, and launch our mental purpose mastermind. You want to get involved in that. It's going to be awesome. We've had so many guys ask us for more. And guess what? We're about to give it to you. We put something really special together. And so if you are not a part of the mental purpose community on Facebook yet, get over there right now. You know what I always say? Mental purpose, people on purpose, take action. Get over there, click join, give us your email address. We're not going to spam you. It's just one of the things we like to keep around so we can let you know what's going on with our events and the podcasts and stuff like that. So go over to the mental purpose community on Facebook, get signed up right now. Our goal is 1,000 members by the end of the year, which is, it's a tall order. However, it can be done. So get over there, join it. Let's get rolling. And then you get all the information about the mental purpose mastermind. Second thing, obviously you're listening to the podcast. If you haven't yet, please make sure you subscribe to the Mental Purpose Podcast. Just go to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Do your thing there, okay? Now, let me tell you a quick story. My guest today is Akshay Nanavati. He is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. And I say that, and I laugh about it, but it kind of surprised me as I said that, because honestly, the guy he's not impressive, like from an ego standpoint. He's just so damn authentic, and the stuff that he does is so like extreme that it's massively impressive, because he's not doing it to impress you. He's doing it because he wants to, and I think that's the impressive piece. So you guys all know our resident doctor, Dr. A, Dr. B, Dr. Balduzzi, however you want to call him. Dr. A lives in Scottsdale. I was out in Scottsdale a few weeks ago, and Aaron and I met up with Dr. A at a place called Optimize, which is like infrared sauna, cold plunge, which I don't like, for those of you that know me. And I met Akshay there, and I got to meet some of Dr. A's inner circle, which was really awesome. And, I was looking at this book called Fearvana that was up on the shelf, and I didn't know that Akshay wrote this book. And I said, man, I'd love to buy one of these. And so he turned around to Aaron and I, who had both grabbed a copy, and said, hey guys, I'm the author. I'll give you a copy. So super awesome. He gave us a couple copies, and I started reading it, just even like in the car real quick while we were going to dinner. And it was quite profound. Then we get to dinner, and the stories that he's telling of tragedy and triumph and suffering and pain and fear and pushing himself were mesmerizing to me and to the rest of the guys at the table, who had probably already heard these stories before about what his adventures are and what he's going to do and prepping himself for. So I knew that this is a real man on purpose that I need to have on this show. And before I said, man, I got to have you on. Like, I want to ask you so many questions right now, but I just want you to be on when I ask you those questions. I want to have a microphone so the audience gets something too. And he said, well, I'm leaving for Antarctica in like a couple weeks. If you can get me before then, awesome. So we got him today, recorded it a week before its release. or 2 weeks before it's released, whatever. And I'm going to tell you right now, like, this episode is mind blowing. I can't even come up with a title that properly just sets this thing up. Akshay is so damn smart. He's had so many experiences. I'm going to read you his bio. And I don't know, I was really in it. I was really impressed by the conversation, his knowledge. By the way, he talks faster than I do. So you may want to slow the episode down if you're used to listening to it on, 1.5 or 1.2. You may want to back it down because he talks faster than I do. But you want to hear everything he has to say, because at his level of mastery, what he comprehends and the way he puts sentences together and the way he strings these words together is pretty awesome. Pretty damn awesome. So let me read you his bio real quick. So Akshay Nanavati has overcome drug addiction, PTSD from fighting the war in Iraq with the Marines, where literally one of his jobs was to walk in front of vehicles and find bombs. He's overcome depression and alcoholism that pushed him to the brink of suicide. And we're going to talk a lot about suicide, depression, reframing, disease, PTSD, death, relationships, suffering, literally the brain, the mind, its wiring, the power of language, habit forming, context, construct. Man, it's going to be, this episode is awesome. So since then, he's built a global business. He's run ultra marathons, like a 24-hour run, and a 50-miler around a cul-de-sac. He's conducted humanitarian work in post-conflict zones. He spent 7 days in darkness, silence, and isolation. And he's explored the most hostile environments on the planet, from mountains to caves to polar ice caps. I'm telling you, it's wild. And he doesn't even get in. He only scratches the surface on stories he tells us. Combining his life experience with years of research in science and spirituality, he wrote the book Fearvana, which is the revolutionary science of how to turn fear into health, wellness, and happiness. About the book, the Dalai Lama said, the Dalai Lama, said, Fearvana inspires us to look beyond our own agonizing experiences and find the positive side of our lives. Here's the other cool thing. All the profits from the book, 100% go to charity. That's how cool this dude is. So Akshay is now on a mission to help our human family build a positive relationship to suffering in order to create a life of greater meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. No further waiting. Get into this episode. Stop your car, stop your workout, do whatever you do. Stop whatever you're doing. You got to listen to this, and you got to pick up Fearvana. I love it. I have a couple copies at my house. If anybody's in the LA area and you want one, come over. Meet with me. We'll have a conversation around it. It'd be great. We'll have a little book club, a little Fearvana book club. Anyway, get into the episode, and thanks for listening. All right, Akshay, dude, it's interesting how I always talk about, in our coaching program, we have this thing called the inner circle, and how I always encourage people, like, audit your inner circle like crazy. And for those of you that have listened to the podcast on the regular, Dr. A is always on. Well, I was in Scottsdale a couple weeks ago, and I reached out to Dr. A and said, hey, man, like, we become buddies now through the podcast. I'm just friends outside of it. I want to meet your inner circle. And he said, cool, man, let's go. Let's do some cold plunging. Let's do some infrared sauna. And that's how I met you, like, randomly at a cold plunge pool in the middle of Scottsdale somewhere. And dude, you literally are one of the most fascinating guys I've ever met. I was sitting at dinner with you that night going, what? And Aaron and I were like starstruck or awestruck at the level at which you play and your adventures are. And so I immediately, and dude, and the book, like, I was going to buy your book, not even realizing you were the author standing right behind me at Optimize. I wasn't putting two and two together. We had just come off that long, retreat. And but I just, dude, your story is awesome. And I just want you to share that with the audience, and your background and your past. And I just have tons of questions for you about, like, how you operate at that level in this world. That's the best way I can say it, man. I'm just fascinated with you.
Well, thank you, brother. I'm honored.
Yeah.
You want me to just jump in with my story? Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
tell you my
yeah.
background, kind of let got me to who I am today and where I am now. So I was born in India, moved around a lot at a young age, moved from Bombay to Bangalore to Singapore to Austin, Texas by the time I was 13. And born to a good family, like great family, loved me. We weren't extremely wealthy at the time, but we certainly weren't poor. So I didn't know really any suffering up to this point, didn't have a traumatic childhood or anything like that. But when I moved to Austin, Texas at the age of 13, soon after moving, I got very heavily into drugs, into alcohol, into just this world of self-destruction. I used to cut myself. I still have scars on my arm from burning myself, cutting myself. Did a lot of things that
Why?
could have.
Why was that? I'm just curious. Why was
Oh,
that?
great question.
Why? Was that just the teenage years, or was that because of something?
My parents have asked us too, like, what could they have done differently? Because again, as I said, I had great parents, not sort of any bad childhood. But, when I'm moving around a lot from a young age, I was very adaptable. But the sort of double-edged sword of adaptability, like any strength, there's also a shadow with that strength, is impressionability. So I was very impressionable and I had no sense of clarity as to who I am and who I wanted to be. So when I moved to Austin, I was sort of doing what it takes to fit in, to be part of a group. And, I don't blame anybody else. I take responsibility for my behavior. But as a 13-year-old, or at this point, 15-year-old child, you're at the effect of your environment a great deal. I certainly didn't have the level of self-awareness I do now, right? So I got into a group of friends that we got into drugs and into alcohol. And as I said, I take responsibility, but had I, let's say, gotten into a group of friends that were ultra runners, I would have gone into that back then, Yeah. And this happened to be it. So being the person that I am, I pushed it as far as possible. So drugs was my vehicle of expression at that point. So back then, me and a friend, we were the first two in our group to start going from just alcohol and marijuana into harder stuff. And that friend is no longer alive today. He OD'd on heroin and died. And I lost two friends like that. And I was heading down that path myself, just very much into a world of self-destruction until I saw the movie Black Hawk Down. That movie changed my life. It planted a seed that forever transformed me. After watching the movie, I read the book Black Hawk Down and started reading book after book after book on military and life in combat. And have you ever seen that movie, Ian?
Yeah, I have. Scary.
So
it was a scary movie.
It's intense. It's horribly intense. But what was so moving about it to me was watching these men who voluntarily place themselves in a situation of extreme danger, knowing, like particularly that scene where, and of course it's based on a true story, where Gary Gordon and Randy Sugar, two Medal of Honor recipients, the Delta snipers, who volunteered to go on the ground to set up a defensive perimeter, knowing that thousands of armed enemy personnel were heading their way. And they went down anyway to protect the second Black Hawk that had crashed, Michael Durant, who was in that chopper. And both of them died because, again, there were two of them fighting vastly outnumbered, and they got killed. But they received a Medal of Honor posthumously for their valor, for making that conscious choice to go down there. And just watching that, it triggered something in me that, I was left in awe at the capacity of the human spirit, at the courage, the selflessness, the sacrifice of putting yourself in that position in service of something else and someone else. And delving into the books after that, it just made me question this really worthless, selfish, meaningless, purposeless existence I was living. And almost overnight after that, decided to stop doing drugs and enlist in the Marines. It took me about a year and a half to get in because I had to get a bunch of medical waivers. I'm a genetic mess. I have flat feet. I have scoliosis. I have a blood disorder that transports less oxygen through my body that two doctors told me would kill me in boot camp. So it took me a long time to get the medical waivers I needed. And honestly, the only reason I got in because it was a post 9/11 world. So they needed young, dumb bodies who wanted to be front. I was signing up to be Marine Corps infantry as well, right? So front line. So we'll take whoever we can get, kind of thing. But right. I'm grateful for it. It transformed me. And that was the birthplace of what is now Fearvana. That became the breeding ground of it, because in the Marines, I learned the beauty of suffering. I learned the value of engaging fear, the value of adversity, because of course, Marine Corps training was hard and I freaking loved it. Like, not only did I obviously survive despite what the doctor said, but I thrived. I graduated infantry school as the honor graduate of my platoon, and I loved the suffering, the pain, the struggle, the adversity, the fear that was gifted to me in the Marines. And so from there, I started seeking out other avenues to explore that, to explore ultimately my own soul and the limitlessness of the human spirit that lives within each of us. So nature became my playground. After joining the Marines, I went mountain climbing, cave diving, skydiving, rock climbing, you kind of name it. Nature was my playground to go explore and systematically transcend one fear at a time. Because before this, I was terrified of everything: roller coasters, open ocean, terrified of Ferris wheels. Forget about even roller coasters. Everything scared me, So I was systematically confronting those fears until then. In 2007, I was deployed to Iraq as an infantry Marine, where out there I had many different jobs. One of my jobs was to walk in front of our vehicle convoys looking for bombs before they could be used to kill me and my fellow Marines.
Right.
As you imagine, a somewhat dangerous job.
Yeah,
because somebody's going to get blown up first, right? Guess who would be? But at this point, I had developed a strong comfort with fear. And, war was obviously not a comfortable environment. It was not an inherently pleasant or fun environment. But despite the struggles, by the end of my deployment, I remember writing in my journal that I'm really going to miss this place when I go home. And I thrived out there. We can even go deeper into that. But just once I came back, to kind of tie a ribbon around the story that led me to Fearvana, is once I came back, I struggled with life in this world. I was diagnosed with PTSD, struggled with depression, was at a point in my life drinking like a 3/4 of a bottle of, like a 750 milliliter bottle of vodka a day, and downing this for days on end. And one morning after one of these binge sessions, I woke up and was seconds away from taking a knife and slitting my wrists, because I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle this pattern of drinking and sobering up. And that moment was rock bottom. That moment was the seed that then led me to delving deep into neuroscience, psychology, and spirituality, to initially just to heal myself, but obviously to help others navigating suffering. Because of course, I'm not the only person who suffered. How do we transcend human suffering is the fundamental question, which I think humanity has wrestled with, and I don't think we truly have an answer for until forever, since the beginning of time. And so that was what led me to then obviously sobering up, the birthplace of Fearvana, leading to the book of Fearvana, to the work that I now do around the business of Fearvana, and ultimately channeling my own darkness, channeling my own demons into running ultra marathons, spending 7 days in darkness, climbing mountains, skiing across polar ice caps, and all of that, from skiing across Greenland to now where I'm 6 days away to going to the South Pole, where I'll be spending 2 months in Antarctica. And but it all started, with the Marines, and then coming out of that, the darkness a few times, and learning to channel that darkness into an experience of bliss.
Yeah, man. There's so much in there that I want to dive into. I don't even know where to go. So go back to that. I think about, I have a lot of friends. I have clients that were military members, Marines, Army Rangers. And my curiosity is always like, how do you not freeze up in those moments when your body, you are in real danger, not like a Ferris wheel danger? Oh, this stupid thing could fall apart. This roller coaster could probably come off, or like flying, or standing on the edge of a cliff. But like your life could be sniped out, blown up, run over, bomb dropped on you at any freaking second.
Mm-hmm.
Is the body like naturally able, or the mind actually naturally able to get through that kind of thing? Or does it take practice? Or what are you doing mantras? Or how the hell are you able to walk in front of this Humvee knowing that your life could be taken at any moment?
A lot of training for sure. Like we spent 5 months training for a 7 deployment, 5 months full-time training day in, day out. And so we're doing things like, going into simulated war environments with paintball rounds. It's super fun in training. It's horrifically terrifying in real world application, but in training, you realize how absurdly dangerous urban warfare is. But we trained immensely for it. And not only that, like me personally, I had confronted risk a great deal at this point. By the time I was deployed, I used to free climb rock walls without rope, 60, 70, 80, 90 foot rock walls that if I fell, I would have, if not died, definitely horrifically injured myself. I'd broken 4 bones in 3 months from rock climbing and skydiving, So by the time I set foot in Iraq, I had confronted fear to such a high degree that it took a lot more for me. And I know this for a fact because we were on missions where people in my same squad had felt threatened, had felt, an amplified danger, versus I was relatively calm. And it's not because I was any braver. It's only because I had put myself in so many risky scenarios that by the time I set foot in a war zone, I was comfortable with fear. I was comfortable with danger at a much higher level than many others, just because my brain had reference points to attach onto when I went into a war zone. But
there's so much that we learn through failure.
Absolutely.
Did you ever process, like, and I wanted to ask you this, and I'm going to ask you that. I wanted to ask you this at dinner. I'm going to ask you this today because I wanted the audience to hear it for the first time I hear it. I mean, dude, you learn through failure. Like, how the hell do you wrap your head around? And I'm going to tell you why I think this. I love flying. I love piloting in an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get my license again, and I want to start flying here in LA in Southern California because it's just freaking gorgeous.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that says, well, you learn from failure a lot. That's not something you want to fail with. So let's just not do it. And my brain goes, you know what? You're right. You're totally right. I got a family. I'm the breadwinner. And it logically makes sense to me and processes that emotion. And it seems so damn real. How the hell do you know? I mean, you don't know, but how do you work through that rolling into a mountain climb at 80 feet? Your body is processing that. And you're not thinking at all, man, this could be it. One slip and it's it. Like I'm just fascinated by that mindset of just persevering and getting through that and calming that sort of amygdala response, prehistoric brain, keep the body alive. That's fascinating to me. How do you do that?
You build your way up the ladder of risk one step at a time, or expand what I call that zone of Fearvana. So I didn't free solo the first time I got on a rock wall, right? You climb with rope. So, but to your point about some of these things like flying, or like when I go to Antarctica, that's a huge reason why I love these expeditions is that they demand perfection out of you. When you go out there, and I've seen it when I was on Denali, I was climbing up in Alaska a few months ago, and there was a guy who took his gloves off for probably minutes during a windstorm to work with something in his tent, and he got frostbite. So there is no room for error out there, or the consequences are fatal. And I love that, because when the environment demands perfection out of you, you have to transcend who you are now to become someone better. But inevitably, you don't just go into a 30 to 40 day Antarctic expedition on day one, right? Even to go into this expedition, you have to prove your mettle. Like I literally have to show my expedition resume. They call the people I went to Denali with to make sure that I'm someone who doesn't freak out in a situation like this. So even though the environments you can't entirely train for, because in those environments the consequences are death, so failure means death, right? Or frostbite, or losing limbs, or something very, very fatal. You can build yourself up to be ready for that environment, and ultimately to not make those mistakes that could have those consequences. So you train your mindset. So like, for example, with training for Denali, I was up in Vermont for 3 months in the winter up in Vermont training, and when storms would hit, it was a winter, so that we'd have these intense storms. I'd go out and ski in them. I remember one day, this was towards the end of winter, and brutal, was like, it was raining, wind, and I was doing a cold river dip in the river out there, and it's battering the wind storms, and storm has a ability to induce panic in you. If I was the only idiot out there, unsurprisingly. So you're completely alone in this environment. Waves are crashing into the rocks, and I'm about to go into the cold river, and it's like really hitting hard, and it can easily induce panic. So I was literally my mantra was, be the eye of the storm, stay centered in the face of external chaos. So point is, I was training myself in a relatively, that environment could have gone horribly south as well. Literally I was running on this trail, and I'm talking 10 feet in front of me, this giant tree crashed right in front of me. Had I been going a little faster, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it was a big enough tree that it would have killed me. So point is to say, it was relatively safe, but even to get there, I didn't just go out in a Vermont storm first time. I had already done a lot to train myself to even be comfortable there, So you're systematically increasing the stressors in order to then thrive in those stressors. And then what now becomes, let's say, stressful to somebody else is comfortable for you, because you've acclimatized to that level of stress. And to a certain degree, you're never going to be entirely, Antarctica is never going to be entirely friendly, no matter how, but that's the point. If it was easy, I wouldn't go do it, right? So that's the big point, is I'm not training to the point to ever have it become easy. I'm training so I can become stronger to face whatever adversity these environments throw at me.
Yeah, and you go to what we perceive as an extreme, but really all this is a training process that anybody can do. Like, I remember years ago, I read the book Rejection Proof, because even though I'd been in the sales business for my whole life with my dad, and then in the real estate business, I still was really scared of rejection.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at people who look at me today and they understand the risks I take in business and the way that I get knocked down and just get back up and run harder, that's what you're talking about. It all comes from practice and understanding that the hits won't kill you.
Exactly.
That's in my world though. Your world, the hits can kill
Totally.
you. So is there just and I want to talk about mantras too before I forget, but is there like this just inherent or built faith that you have that whenever it's your time, it's just going to be your time? Like we kind of talked about that at dinner. It's like you're going to be alone you literally will be alone in the most remote place in the world, the most remote person out there, literally. And like death could be on your doorstep at any time, literally at any time. And like, are you just at peace with that? Or, I mean, how do you process that? Because I think I'd be thinking like, fuck, I don't want to die, man. I'm going to make moves so I don't die. But you can't do that. You have to make moves that keep you looking forward, not thinking about something that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not unaware of the fact, obviously, that I could die, and I'm terrified of death. I don't.
Sure.
I'm absolutely terrified. I don't want to die. I love my life. I have so much
Sure.
to live for, so much more I want to do after every expedition. So I'm terrified of death. But that's the beauty of it. These experiences force you to confront your own mortality, and by doing so, by embracing this fear of death, by engaging the fear of death, it awakens the true gift that is life. You cannot really know the power of life unless you've confronted death. And I've been blessed to have not just walked away from it on multiple occasions. Like when I was in Iraq, my vehicle drove over an active bomb that for some reason didn't explode. I've almost been killed by a falling boulder while ice caving in the Himalayas, seconds away from it. I mentioned this incident in Vermont. I was when I spent 1 month dragging a 190-pound sled for 350 miles across Greenland in brutal polar storms, the likes of which I'll experience in Antarctica. The following year, a British explorer was killed in such storms. I've lost friends to addiction, to suicide, to war. I've been on the verge of my own suicide. I've still faced death. So point of all that is to say is that by being face to face with death, it transforms how you engage with life. It brings an intensity, a fire, a passion, and enthusiasm for life that is very alluring, very addicting, and very profound. And so I do these things not to I'm not like, not people often think there's sort of, sometimes people say like, do you have a death wish? Or like they think I'm not scared of dying because I go face death. And that's not true at all. Like the fear of death is one of the most profound, powerful experiences. One of the most powerful things to engage with because of what it does to life. That's the value of engaging death, is ultimately not death itself. Like death is the means to awaken true life. And fear, when you develop a positive relationship to fear, the fear of death, because I've often heard like in spirituality, don't be scared of dying. It's natural. And I get it. I get where that's coming from. But I think it's missing out on what the fear of death. When you develop a positive relationship to fear, you realize that fear of death is one of the most profound things you can possibly experience. And I want to be afraid of death because, for one, it also helps me better prepare. Like, because I am scared of dying, I'm training like a savage for these expeditions. I'm going to Antarctica this year to prepare for the crossing next year. I'm doing expeditions in the Arctic. I'm going above and beyond with the level of training because I'm so scared of dying and I don't want to die. So the fear of death, it just fuels you to prepare, but it also awakens life, and it pushes you harder to live each day with a greater enthusiasm and intensity and fire than you possibly could without having known and come face to face with the presence of death.
What's interesting is I've talked to a lot of guys, especially on this podcast, but in my personal life, I've talked to a lot of men who have been on the verge of or like at the door of suicide. And to talk to them today, like to talk to you today, as motivational as you are, like determined and driven, I wonder, can you kind of break down? Because obviously I know that there's tens of thousands of people that listen to this show, maybe hundreds of thousands, but in years to come, I don't know. But like, there's somebody on this listening that said that it is in that space in their mind, like life's not worth it. And they don't understand your story or other guys' stories who have been in those trenches and now are like about to cross Antarctica or walk 350 miles across Greenland and face death, when death was literally like your only out, your only way to actually feel better.
Yeah.
Now death is a totally different way to experience life, like the chance of dying. And I want to know your association with that, because that's a very juxtaposed place to be. You're going from like fuck, I can't take this cycle, I'm about to kill myself, to I'm going to put myself on the edge of death, be as prepared as possible, be as flawless as possible to not die. That's a really crazy place to like just to transverse. Like that's an Antarctica to transverse if you think about it. That's really far. So I don't even know what my question is, dude. I just think that's really interesting. And like, how does somebody comprehend that if they're in that place now, that they can get to a place by shifting what, by changing their what, by trying this?
Awesome question. So when you're in that space, and this is something that people like, when someone's really in the low and someone wants to help that person, they often try to share stories like mine or share something inspiring. And again, I don't say that with an ego, but the point is that when you're really in that space, and an inspiring story can be very destructive because it only makes you feel shittier about who you are.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And this was very important for me. Like this was a interesting realization for me, and also now helping others, not just who are in the darkness, but helping family who wants to help their own family members who are in the darkness. So the point is to say, when you're in that space, you want to be wary about going to seek out sources of inspiration, because it's going to make you feel really shitty about yourself. Now, there's a time for it. Like today, now I seek out inspiration because it drives me to be better, but you have to kind of navigate. Like if you're going from 0 to 10, 0 is I'm on the verge of suicide, and then 10 is I'm an absolute master of my craft, life could not be better. The movement from 0 to 2 is very different than 2 to 4 and 4 to 6 and 6 to 8 and 8 to 10 and so on and so forth. The movements are different. So let's start with, 0 to 2. How do we navigate that? The first step, when you're like, what was invaluable for me, and this is easier said than done, which I get, is to recognize and to start practicing and training the disidentification from the emotion, from the experience. Because what happens is, and I'll give you an example, like I was working with one kid who used to say things like, I am depressed, because some therapist, in my opinion, terribly labeled, just a horrible decision, labeled her with depression. So what happens is when people go through this, we'll say things like, I am depressed, I have depression, I am sad. Like it becomes their self-identity. I've heard somebody say that the two most powerful words in the English language are I am, because what you attach onto that becomes who you are. Totally. And this is easier said than done. I get it. And I'm not saying it happened to me overnight, because when I hit rock bottom, I didn't magically change and get better overnight. It was a slow climb out of that abyss, right? I broke my sobriety multiple times after that. So it didn't, I want to be very clear, it didn't magically change. Like it wasn't super simple, snap, everything gets good. But the starting point was, and I'll give you concrete examples to elaborate on this, was recognizing to disidentify myself from the experiences, from the thoughts, the feelings that I was experiencing, that I was going through, to fully grasp and to train it. It comes with training to recognize that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my experiences. I am the thinker of my thoughts, I am the feeler of my feelings, I am the experiencer of my experiences. So there is a space between what is and who we choose to be outside of what is. Most of us are not aware of that space. I had to train in building that space. So I'll give you a very, again, concrete example. When I came back from the war, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was told because I struggled with survivor's guilt. I lost a close friend of mine to the war. I didn't like being in crowds. I was jumpy with loud noises. These were all symptoms of quote unquote post-traumatic stress disorder. As I started delving deep into the study of the brain, I started to recognize that being jumpy with loud noises was not a disorder. I spent 7 months in a war zone where loud noises equals death. Inevitably, my brain was more hypervigilant than the average person. I struggled with survivor's guilt. Everybody, friends, family, therapists, I get it. Again, it all came from a place of love. Don't feel guilty. It's not your fault. And I get it. Like, look, war happens the way it happens. Nobody can control it. Bullets fly where they fly. But they were trying to say, and we do this all the time, don't be scared, don't worry, don't fear, don't stress, don't feel guilty. We say, don't feel what you feel, right? And the reality is, guilt was not bad. It's not a bad emotion. Guilt was purely an expression of love. The reason I felt guilty was because of the camaraderie that I had built with my brothers in the Marines. So as I started to recognize all this, I started to release the label of disorder and started to learn that post-traumatic stress is not indicative of post-traumatic stress disorder. They're two very different things. And by releasing the label of disorder, I started to release that identity from who I was. Because what happens is, when people, we've created a paradigm in society that trauma equals disorder, war equals trauma equals disorder. And there's actually, and this is proven, like Dr. Martin Seligman, he's one of the leading researchers in the positive psychology movement. He went to West Point, the military academy, asked the cadets, how many of you have heard of post-traumatic growth? Something like 5% raise their hands. Yeah. He asked them, how many of you have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder? And it was like 95%. It's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We believe that we go there, and we're not doing this consciously, of course, but we start to believe that that's what happens. And to this day, when someone hears I'm a veteran, and I get it, it's coming from a place of love, but there's often this sort of pity that, oh, poor you, like there's something wrong with you because you've seen that experience. So individually as well as collectively, we've created a paradigm that trauma or adversity equals disorder. And that paradigm is deeply flawed. So the starting point was releasing what I call the second darts, and I'll explain what that means. So in Buddhism, the Buddha once said that we're all stabbed by the two darts of suffering. The first dart is the one we don't control. And neuroscience backs this up as well. We don't control most of what happens in our brain. I couldn't control the fact that I was jumpy with loud noises. My brain learned to associate that as a survival mechanism, very valid survival mechanism. Same thing today. While you and me are chatting in this room and somebody comes in with a gun, I'm not going to choose to feel fear. My brain's going to respond. Right. So the first dart is the thing we don't control. The second dart is the thing we do on top of all those things. So for example, if I stub my toe against a door, the first dart is the pain in the toe. It's there. The second dart is when I start saying things like, this door's stupid, God hates me, bad things only happen to me, this house is stupid. And we do this with our emotions too. So post-traumatic stress, I could not control. Yes, I had that response, but what I can control is the attachment of the disorder. The second dart is the label of disorder. Another example, and I'm painting the example just to make this concrete. I went climbing with a friend, and it was not like an intense vertical climb. It was kind of a scramble. And she got like super nervous on this climb, right? She was terrified, like gripping the wall. We eventually got to the top, came back down, started driving away and chatting about it. And she started saying, you had no fear. Like, what was wrong with me? Why did I feel scared? And she started beating herself up for feeling fear. The only reason I did not have fear on that scramble was because I was a climber. I had done a lot tougher climbs, not because I was any braver. My brain had different references than hers. As someone who didn't climb, she didn't have those references, so she was scared. And it took no courage on my part to climb because I didn't have fear. You can only have courage with fear. So it took courage on her part to transcend that fear and keep climbing. But the real problem was those second darts, the beating yourself up after that. And that's how we navigate those low motion. When you're in that low point, you're going to feel low. You're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel struggle. You're going to feel pain. Nothing I or anybody can say can make that go away. You're going to have to navigate that. That's the harsh, but the reality. And if you're, and that's also one of the biggest problems is we do everything we can to get to the other side of pain in the quickest, easiest way possible. Like somebody asked me in one interview, they gave me a scenario. What if somebody's going through a divorce? What would you do in this scenario? I said, regardless of the scenario you paint me, the fundamental problem is we are looking for the quickest, easiest, least painful way out of the problem. Totally. That's the problem. Yeah. And if you do that, you are setting yourself up for a lifetime of misery. So you're going to have to suffer. The core, as you know from our conversation, the core ethos of Fearvana and who everything I am is developing a positive relationship to suffering, right? So embrace the isness of that pain and recognize that you don't have to be defined by those second darts. So release that, okay, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel stress. There's nothing wrong with you. Just because you have it, it doesn't mean it's a disorder, like embracing the isness of what is. Because when you do that, it releases the constriction of trying to fight that emotion because the world told you should be fearless or don't be scared. And dude, the top guys in the personal development realm, I'm not going to name names, but the biggest names, I see them say things like, here's how to eliminate your anxiety. And it is so destructive because what happens is then when somebody feeling the anxiety, they think, oh, Joe Schmo expert there said I shouldn't feel it. So there's something wrong with me for feeling it. And they go down that second dart syndrome, this downward spiral of beating themselves up instead of saying, okay, hey, it's cool. It's human. I can feel this emotion. Now, what do I do with it? How do I channel it into my purpose? So once you release that identity, and I'll pause because I know I've been talking for a minute, but the next step there is channeling it into what I call your worthy struggle, your path, your purpose, your mission, because you cannot just leave it in a void. A lot of guys I know who've came out of addiction without channeling it into something else, the void will inevitably go. When the darkness hits, they went back to addiction and they died. I've lost people that way. So you can't leave that void. It has to be the pain of whatever you've gone through, the darkness. Like the struggles I've gone through, they haven't gone away. I still feel survivor's guilt. I still feel guilt, but I just learned to channel it. Like, for example, and then I'll stop my rant after this. When I learned all these things that I'm sharing, I put a picture of my friend that I lost in the war up on my wall. And it said, this should have been you. Earn this life. And my guilt, it didn't go away. It became my ally.
Yeah. It's just reframe though. It's a total reframe.
Reframe, exactly.
I've got to go back because a lot of stuff you said. So step one is recognize and start training the disassociation and disidentification of myself from the feelings, thoughts, and experiences. I'm gonna get my team pull the exact thing that you said so we can write that out for the show notes. And then the second one was channel the pain into a worthy purpose.
Well, before even channeling the pain, accept and embrace the pain. Like, don't run away from the suffering. Don't beat your, like, again, another example. I was doing an interview. I was very blessed to interview Dr. Drew, and somebody called in on the interview. She had gone through PTSD because of the Boston bombing. And so she was asking for some support around that. So, we both were kind of helping. And at one point I said, okay, the next time you feel the trigger of post-traumatic stress rise up, I just want you to kind of pause and notice it. And she goes, that's really hard. And I go, I know it's hard. It's going to be hard. But the thing is, and it's not her fault. Like, this is not anything bad about her. It is hard. But she wanted to get to the other side of all of this stuff without going through that. And you just cannot.
Yeah.
Like, the way through the pain is, the way on the other side of the pain is through the pain is to be the pain. So accept it. And that's why the most important skill to master, like the most important skill to master in life, is to develop a positive relationship to suffering. If you fall in love with suffering, or as I like to say, to suffer well, you will not only be able to handle life when it punches you hard in the face, you will also be able to enjoy the journey on whatever worthy struggle you are pursuing. You've built a business. It wasn't easy. Raising a family, writing a book, running ultramarathons, whatever the worthy endeavor in life, it's going to be hard. But if you fall in love with suffering, you'll be able to enjoy the ride. And it's not inherently pleasant. It's not. That's the nature of suffering. It fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But embrace that. And that comes with practice.
It's interesting. This goes back to the inner circle, and this is going to sound light compared to what we're talking about, and I'm going to go deep in a second. I just want to point this out. There's a lot of suffering that happens in my body when I think about getting into cold water. And you watched me for the first time get into a cold bath, probably for the first time in about 3 years, because I've been building it up in my head about how terrified I am of cold water and how I don't love it because I have trauma from when I was a kid and I was a swimmer and I got pushed into cold water every day and by the coaches, and they were yelling and all these things trigger. And then I forget his name. Mike said to me, it's okay. Like, I'm going to give you a process now. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. And he's like, no, it is. It's going to be just fine. But he didn't make me do it.
Yeah.
He gave me different context around it. He made me understand the suffering that I was going to be going through. And he said, look, man, I'm going to give you 3 steps. Ready? Here's this one. Then one of them was, I'm going to give you a mantra. And the last one is, I just want you to listen to the beat of the drum. Like, we're going to get you in the water today. He didn't make it you got to do it. And he didn't make it a choice. He just gave me this context to where I could exist in that context. And the fear actually wasn't as present. And the suffering wasn't as death defying as it was in my brain. And he just went and got his drum and came over and he was like, come on, man. And you guys were sitting there watching me. And he's like, come on, man, let's just here. This is how you do it. Just walk up here 1 foot at a time. Don't slip. You don't have to put your shoulders in if you don't want. Just now follow the drum and count to 3 and say your mantra. And all of a sudden I'm fucking shoulder deep in cold water.
Yeah.
And my process in my brain wasn't, this sucks. My process was, holy shit. It worked. Wow. And then I started processing, okay, I need to get back in cold water now because I have a different context of the relationship of this fear and suffering now.
Yeah.
That this guy changed in a moment. So I want to go back for a second to PTSD. I talk to a lot of guys who call me and say, hey, man, I have PTSD. Can you help me work through it? And I go, no. I'm not a psychologist. I'm an expert level coach, but I'm not a psychologist. If you're looking for that, that's not me. Can I help you? Yes. Will you believe me? No. Because you want to see the pieces of paper on the wall. Can you navigate through and evolve out of PTSD in your opinion?
100%. I think the key is like recognizing post-traumatic growth is as much of a reality, if not more, than post-traumatic stress disorder. The problem is the attachment of disorder. Like, there are neurological factors for sure that at a very, very, very heightened level of stress that some people have gone through, where it's genuinely like so damaging. And this is going to be like controversial. Some people are going to say for sure, but most of us have post-traumatic stress, not post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of us who even are labeled with post-traumatic stress disorder, we throw out that label so fucking arbitrarily, and it's destructive. I don't say this. I say this with pure love because I want people to release that label and to recognize, look, I got post-traumatic stress. Yes, maybe it's it's sure. I got some responses to post-traumatic stress, but if I can let go of that disorder attachment to it, I can recognize that post-traumatic growth is is as much of a reality, if not more. So really recognize, and this comes back to reframing a relationship to suffering, to trauma, that realizing that the greatest growth that happens in our lives comes from suffering. It comes from the darkness. It comes from knowing the demons. Like I always like to say, one of my many mantras is the greater your demons, the greater the divinity required to rise above them. You know, so it's the greater the more darkness you've experienced, and I've experienced this viscerally from the darkness retreat. We talked about this, I think, when we met. You know, when I came out of the darkness and I saw the light, I had never seen the light that looked that way in my entire life, because after 7 days in darkness, the light was revealed to me in a way that I could not have known unless I had been in the dark. Yeah. And so the key is to start recognizing that whatever suffering we've gone through, it's a fucking gift, man. And it's hard to get it when you're really in it. God knows I get that. If somebody's listening and really in it, you're going to be, it's like you're thinking, well, this is not a gift at all. Like, you know, I get it. But when you start falling in love, like now when it happens, I embrace it, all of it, because now, even if it's a suffering I didn't choose, obviously going to Antarctica is a suffering I'm choosing, and I'm not unaware of the fact that I'm blessed to be able to choose my suffering. But even when it's thrown upon me, I'm now able to, because I've trained in it, to recognize that even this is a gift, but that comes with practice.
We can go into a very different place here. I'm not going to go there. I talk to so many people. I'm listening to you say, like, we throw the word disease or disorder around, which is so true. No one's ever heard of PTS. No one's ever heard of PTS. It's PTSD. Like, if you said to someone, well, do you have PTS from war? And they'd be like, well, I have PTSD.
Exactly.
So we're not, I want to be very clear. We're not discounting anything that people are experiencing.
Not at all.
What we're saying is there's a different relationship with trauma. Trauma is going to be there. A friend of mine from Baltimore reached out to me this morning. He said, hey man, I was listening to your episode with, I forget who it was. It was on like childhood trauma from messed up parents, right? I forget the name of the episode, and he said, like, I never realized that trauma wasn't it could be a good thing. Like trauma could come from a good source. It could be too much love or too much candy or too much of this, not always associated with bad. But if you think about all the patterns that we have for our lives, most of the things that we do are distracting us from the traumas and the bullshit that come up in our minds every day. Whether it's from a recent trauma from college or a job that you got fired from and you were traumatized because you tripped and fell and everybody laughed at you on the way out and called you a loser, that's trauma. Or the way your parents talked to you or interacted or whatever it might be, your present moment is dealing with those things. And what Aaron and I call angles of avoidance, the distraction methods that you have, which there are a lot of, those are you distracting yourself from dealing with the shit. And what you're saying is, just like, I think I told you this when we were at dinner, the shaman, the first time I did ayahuasca, she looked at me and she goes, dude, you're white as a ghost and you're shaking. And I'm like, dude, I'm afraid I'm going to die tonight. She goes, well, if you die tonight, then you'll have no more problems. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you sound so clear about that? And she's like, because if you die tonight, you will have no more problems. In your mind and in your feelings, you will have no more of that. You will be free. Now, if you want to, you drink this and you will go through and get out. But the only way out is through.
Yeah.
You cannot skip steps here. So if you die tonight, it was your time. Be at peace with that and drink this medicine, or don't drink this medicine, but don't complain that you have to still keep going through this even though you want out. And I was like, ugh. Okay. And I drank it and I learned a lot from it. And it scared me so badly, but I didn't want to keep making excuses and detours around the fucking mountain that I knew I needed to climb. I couldn't. You just take that to extreme now. But the book, and like, I've been reading the book. I'm a very slow reader. You're probably like, I gave it to you 3 weeks ago. I'm a very slow reader. Like it's fascinating, the research that you have in there. I encourage everybody to go out and get your book, Fearvana, Fearvana. It's like, dude, it's like you're speaking the language that I speak in my head about myself and the way that I help myself to be able to help other people. And I want to get your thoughts on diseases that people say are diseases like alcoholism. And again, to the audience, this is not like, I'm just getting Akshay's opinion. That's all. just want your opinion because I have my own thought process around it. What is your thought process on alcoholism being a disease? However, workaholism isn't a disease.
Yeah.
But gambling is a disease. Drugs are a disease. Porn is a disease. But workaholic is not a disease. Why is that? When all of them have to do with avoiding your trauma.
Yeah.
At the base level.
Yeah, and I love that. So I resonate with you, I think, tremendously on this, but let's delve a little deeper. So let's see alcoholism. There are neurological forces that make some people, I've delved a lot into the research on this. Sure. And I'm not, I don't claim to obviously know it all. I'm not an expert. I know what I know from experience as well as from my research. That there's neurological forces that contribute to some people being more prone to having an addictive nature, right? Like they've shown that an alcoholic will often have like dopamine receptors that are kind of flawed, and therefore they seek it more and they're more prone to get into things like alcoholism and drugs. Now, so I have never put my brain in a brain scan, but I would venture to bet money that I have some dopamine receptors that are all kinds of fucked up in there. Not just because of alcoholism. I mean, look at the shit that I do, right? Like I do some pretty intense things. So there's all kinds of brain wiring. But here's the reality is that when we attach words, just like what I was saying earlier, to disease to it, it completely changes the construct on how we operate around that. Now, look, we don't control most of what happens in our brain, but we can change our brain. That's a neurological fact. It's called the science of neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic, meaning that the brain is malleable. We can change it. When we attach the word disease onto it, like, okay, this is a key thing. So now people often say, okay, if alcoholism isn't a disease, then what about someone who's got like cancer? It's just as much a disease as that is. And I get where you're coming from, but here's a distinction between the brain and every other organ in the body. Every other organ in the body, it is not. Now, again, we can delve deep into this. Some people say there's a consciousness in the gut and the heart and all that kind of stuff. But the brain, think of the brain as two separate entities. There's the mind and the brain. The physical brain is this physical piece of meat in your skull, right? The mind is consciousness. And the brain changes the mind just as much as the mind changes the brain, meaning that if my brain has like the physical structure has some dopamine wiring that's flawed, it's going to change how my consciousness operates. And this has, again, been proven. Like, as an example, they did one study, which I talk about in the book, on London taxi drivers. They had a larger hippocampus, which is the part of the brain associated with memory, because apparently the London streets are quite complex. And so they have to memorize these streets, and therefore their part of the brain associated with memory was physically larger than other people. So we can physically change the structure of our brain through conscious effort, and vice versa. The physical structure of our brain will affect our consciousness. So the point of this is to say is that most of us are not consciously changing our brain. It's happening for us as we go through the experience of life. But when you start building that space that we talked about earlier, the space between what is and who you choose to be outside of what is, you recognize that you do not have to be defined by the patterns of your brain. So yes, my brain might have different wiring, but certainly has different wiring than yours, than everybody. We are all born with different genetics, and we can choose to be victimized to that and say, oh, woe is me, right? Like I'm flat feet, I have scoliosis, I have blood disorder, I've got fucked up dopamine receptors, I'm a giant mess, right? Or I can say, this is awesome. Like I'm grateful for all this shit because it's pushed me to a level to become someone I have to work harder in order to attain a certain level of athletic mastery because of all this shit. And I fucking love that. Like that drive, the fight is what it's all about. So coming back to the question about, is it a disease? The challenge is, if you choose to label it as such, it completely changes your construct around it. And that construct shapes your reality. Words have a lot of power. They shape our emotions. They've also done studies on this. When I say I am depressed, it will change how I feel versus if I were to say I'm a little down today. You know what I mean? The words we use for our experience shape our experience and vice versa, right? So the point is, that's why I do not resonate. And some people, look, if it's worked for you, great, with the sort of AA thing of, I'm an alcoholic. Like, why in the fuck would I label myself an alcoholic? Yeah, I've never in a million years say that. I don't even say I had PTSD. I mean, sometimes it might slip out in a conversation, a stream, but to myself, I was diagnosed with PTSD, which is true, but I don't have it. I'm not like going to label myself with that. I am whoever I choose to become, So that distinction, and that's why I don't like the assignment of that word. And this does not mean, this is another point to bring up, because sometimes when people say like, it doesn't mean you're ignoring reality. When I say like, sometimes when I've talked about this labeling thing, people are like, are you just then like ignoring? No, it's like these two forces can coexist. I can acknowledge the isness of something. Like, let's just say, okay, I have thalassemia. I have a dopamine wiring, right? It's there, but I'm not going to make it real by putting it out into the world, putting it out to myself. I'm not unaware it's not there. So when I say somebody's struggling with drinking, yes, there are people who are more prone to addiction than others. Neurologically, that's a sort of verifiable fact. But so I can acknowledge that, accept that, but I'm not going to make it real by defining it and making it my identity, because then it fuels into that. It makes it that much more real. So that's why I don't use that. And I mean, even if you go deep into the nature of trauma, like what makes a traumatic experience traumatic? What is trauma? So if you release all words, like every time we attach words onto an experience, onto a thing, we are attaching a conceptual thought to it.
Yeah, it's context. Yeah,
exactly.
And the power of language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when you release all conceptual thought, when you release all context, there is, and it's an imperceptible moment, but there's an imperceptible space between pure experience and your context that you attach onto it. The constructs at a very simplistic level. When I see a red door, how do I know it's red? What is red? Red is a color. I've been taught that thing equals red. And so when I see a red door, I'm thinking red. But what if I didn't know it was red? There's a pure, imperceptible, hard to even fathom moment between pure experience and between pure isness and every construct we attach onto it. And the constructs we attach shape our reality. So when we say disease, when we say trauma, when we say depression, when we say sadness, when we say happiness, when we say any word, we are creating a construct around this experience, around this emotion, around this thought that shapes our reality. And the key thing is you got to be very, very, very careful what those constructs are, because those constructs shape your reality.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. But this goes back to inner circle again. You've got to be very aware. And I did not intend to do this, but I was just thinking, I was like, wow, man, like that's so important. I'm thinking like your inner circle is so supportive of what you're doing. What would it be like if your inner circle was like, you're what? You're going to Antarctica? Are you out of your fucking mind? Are you an idiot? What would that do to you?
I get that too.
Like I watched your inner circle. Like I watched Anthony, Dr. A for those of you, or Dr. A, Dr. B, whatever I call him on here. It's Dr. somebody. I watched him and oh my God, I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Trevor. No. Yes. Trent. I'm watching him and Trent formulate these pills suspended in this for additional that while you're on your trek, so you don't have to do this and you could just pop it. You don't have to mix it. So you don't have to I'm like, wow, man, that's a hell of an inner circle. It's a hell of an inner circle. Mm-hmm. But what you said in terms of context and language pattern, it sounds so damn simple, but it is the vicious cycle that most human beings run in, is these contexts from language that they put their life into, themselves into, their friends, their group, their family, their job, their money, their everything into, and they just exist in this little world. It's like the crabs in the bucket. Like the words are the crabs, and they just kind of keep you at a certain level. But I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, man, like, you don't know what it's like. You don't have a disease like this. And I said, bro, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but I don't have Crohn's disease. Like you said, it's something I was diagnosed with. Yeah. He's like, but how do you not, why are you denying that? He said, like, I'm an alcoholic. It's a disease that I have. And I said, no. And this is my opinion, audience. So just chill out. I've gone through a lot of AA stuff with family members and a lot of friends of mine. And I've been to a lot of meetings to support them and researched a lot. Like, why can't it be the context of, in order to solve the challenges in my head and the feelings in my body, I use this thing? Because like I asked you earlier, it's alcohol, it's gambling, it's drugs, it's porn, it's sex, it's work, it's running, it's exercise, it's going to the gym 18 times a week. Like, it's all those things to combat, distract from, or avoid the things that we got to deal with. Trauma from our past. So why can't an alcoholic not be an alcoholic, but someone who chooses to use alcohol to combat the pain or feelings or thoughts that they're feeling in that moment about something that has happened or hasn't happened or happened in their past? Why can't that be it? And I know you agree with that.
Yeah, and I feel you. And like,
that simple, can it?
The challenge is, and again, I'm going to get a lot of shit for this from somebody, I'm sure,
Me
but
too.
it's very alluring to be a victim. So when you say, dude, you don't get me, you're saying, no, you don't get, and dude, I can't tell you how often I hear this. And fuck, I've been through it, man. No, man, nobody knows my pain. You guys, nobody gets it. I'm like, but it's very alluring to be a victim because look, there's a double-edged sword to taking responsibility for your life. On the one hand, if your life isn't the way you look, guess whose fucking fault it is? It's on you. That's dark. That's hard to admit. But the beautiful side is if your life isn't get where you want it to be, guess who gets to create it? You. So there's an empowerment to that, but it's very alluring to be a victim. So it's easier in some ways. Like, man, hey, nobody gets me. My life sucks. It's like the world is out to get me. So no, like I'll stay in that space because then it's a way to justify my existences and how I want to be, and it's not my fault. So it's very alluring, and that's. Again, this is a hard thing to say to someone who's in it. They're like often like I've no doubt somebody who either might listen to this or even people tell me like, fuck you, you don't get me. I'm not a victim. And here's the thing. If you choose to stay into that, like you're going to, it's on you. But the thing is, and this is the hard part, coming back to the constructs we were talking about, is it's really hard for people to see that the world they see, you have to like recognize the world we see is not, we're not engaging with reality as it is. We are not engaging with the world. We are engaging with the world through our lens of reality. Yeah. Very simply, think if I'm wearing red glasses, I could look at a green tree, but the tree is still going to look red. Yeah. So the constructs with which we view the world are mental models, our beliefs, our perspectives about reality. And those constructs shape our reality. Now, for so many of us, and I can't tell you how many people I engaged with like this, some of the people who are closest to me in my life, and it's sad to see sometimes, they don't see it as a construct. They don't see it as a lens. They'll say, no, this is how the world is. But instead of saying, this is not how the world is, this is how I see the world, this is my lens of the world. And that is how you start changing, is to start recognizing that I don't see reality as it is. I start seeing it as a construct. And a simple way to do that, to make it practical, how does one do this? I literally, like all the time, recognize, acknowledge, use a mantra. I'm not engaging with reality, I'm engaging with my lens of reality. So I use, and this goes way deep into lucid dreaming and a separate concept, but some of mine is, I am the dreamer in this dream. Like I'll say that when I get into my car, I'm a dreamer in this dream. So what I'm acknowledging and pausing to notice to myself is that reality, quote unquote, reality, all of it, the green trees I see when I'm driving, all of it, it's a dream reality. It's not real. It's a construct. Everything is a construct. Now, look, this doesn't mean the tree's not there. This doesn't mean if I don't crash into a tree, I'm not going to die. Yeah, it's there. But so you have to wrestle with the duality of this, is that if I jump off a building, it's there. But how I will die. How I see the world, the space between the tree being green and the pure isness of it, that's all a construct. And when I start training myself to see reality and me as the dreamer in this quote unquote reality that's creating, I can start separating myself from the fact that that the world isn't real and everything I engage with is a construct. As simple as when I see a doorknob, I don't think about how to open the door. I know how to open the door, right? I just walk up to it and I know. But how do I know? Because that construct has been taught to me. Yeah. And I'm not saying you need to do this all the time, because it'd be highly dysfunctional to like pause to be, sometimes you just want to move through the day. But the more you train, like especially if you're just starting out, train yourself in this all the time. You're getting in your car. Use triggers. Get in the car. I'm the dreamer in this reality. Reality isn't real. You walk out the door. You're standing in line to get coffee. Recognize, look around, and pause to notice that you are not engaging with reality. You are engaging with your lens of reality. And what this does is the more you train yourself in this, the more you will start to release yourself from all constructs in order to create more empowering ones. So the next time you're going through a dark moment, next time something life happens, you will start to see, oh, wait, it's my mental models around it, my perspective around it is shaping that reality, but it's not inherently real. That's why we know like two people can go through the same exact scenario. One person can be smiling, embracing it, falling in love with it. And the other person can talk about how the world sucks and everything is horrible, because totally. Same reality, objectively, externally, but different reality internally. Right. So we have to recognize that space.
Yeah, but if you look at it, for the times that I accidentally catch the news, this is the general consensus among the population, the general population, the vast population, is that all these people are this, all those people are that. If you're this, that's that. If you're not that, that's this. And you're like, what the fuck? How can people think that generally? Like, how does someone go to the polls and go, yes, that person, and no matter who it is? I'm not talking about like the horrible human beings that we've had in elected offices lately. I'm talking about just any of these characters. How does somebody go to the polls and go, that guy's going to do a great job. He thinks that all of these people are X. He's going to be great for our society. How that, like, and the way that I say that or think or process through that, I go, oh no, they literally are looking at this through that lens, same lens that this guy looks at it through, and thinks that all of these people are ruining our country. And you're like, what the fuck? Is this for real? Are these people that like vapid and like vastly out of their minds to reality that they follow this person? And the answer is yes. Unfortunately, and scarily, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But like, dude, I could talk to you for freaking 10 hours. And I need you to come back from the Antarctica trip so we can talk some more.
Roger that, brother.
That. But lastly, I want you to talk about two things. The Antarctica trip really quickly, like everybody that you're listening, that's listening, don't take any of this lightly. Just like put yourself in this scenario and realize what Akshay is about to go do. This is no joke. This isn't walking through the Appalachian Trail in the wintertime. This isn't Alaska. This is Antarctica. And it's like, dude, just describe that like you were describing to me. So like, just tell everybody this thing that you're going to do.
Yeah. So the one I'm doing this year or the next year or both?
Well, both, but really next year's the big
one. So next year's is the one I'm training for. Next year's I'm going to Antarctica in 6 days to do a 30 to 40 day expedition to the South Pole, where I'll be walking where only 49 human beings have ever gone. This time I'll be with a team. It's a very intense expedition in its own right. Antarctica is without a doubt one of the most unforgiving, hostile, inhospitable environments on the face of the planet. The polar storms are horrific. There's crevasses that can kill you. There's bitter cold where in a windstorm, if you show your skin for seconds, you'll get frostbite. So this year I'm going for 30 to 40 days skiing to the South Pole, followed immediately by a climb of Mount Vinson, which is the tallest mountain in Antarctica. And all of this is training for next year. Next year, what I'm doing is the big one. As you know, the next year's one, it'll be 3.5 months. So 105 days skiing 1,700 miles completely alone, solo, across the entire continent of Antarctica. It'll be the first ever human-powered crossing of the continent. Human-powered meaning there's no dogs, no wind support. I'll be dragging my own sled, which will weigh about 400 pounds, with through 3.5 months worth of food and supplies to survive out there to make the entire crossing. That will be the first ever crossing of the continent.
I mean, you channeled. If anybody wants to talk about redirection, reframe, rechanneling, re-establishing context, you took your pain and went to a place that not only pushes you to an extreme, which is very inspiring, but I think that's the point, is that with this story of, we call it triumph, from where you were to where you are, like, it's so inspiring to anybody who says, I'm down on my ass right now. I'm in the bottom of a bottle every day, or I'm down at the bottom of a pill case every day, and I don't know how to fucking do this. Like, we literally described it today, and that literally, you are one choice away from death, or you're one choice away from having a mindset to where you can push yourself and like challenge yourself and embrace suffering to build up I don't know if a tolerance is the right word, but build up a tolerance to suffering, where suffering is actually how you like embrace life, because you know this level of suffering that is deep and dark and shitty, but that just makes you enjoy life more. And I think that, like, the way that you spun that and reframe that is fucking gorgeous, man. It's beautiful. I can't wait for a follow-up interview after even after you get back from Antarctica this time. I mean,
and this one will be intense even in its own right. Exactly.
Like, you're not like, oh, I'm gonna go like kind of dip my feet in the water, like I'm gonna stay for about 3 nights and fly back out. 30, 40 days. I mean, dude, how are you gonna practice? I have 100 questions for you, but you're out of time. How are you gonna practice being alone out there, knowing that no one comes for you, and in the same capacity, knowing that you're actually the safest you could be, because no one can get you, because nobody's there. There's no animals. It's just nature that can take your life at any time. Like, you don't have the normal society, like, oh, someone could break into my house and kill me or steal some shit from me. or an animal could come bite me, but nature may take you. Like, how
Yeah.
do you deal with the alone and the, that's the stuff that I process. Like,
Yeah. I mean, spending like 7 days in darkness was a good training ground for solitude.
sure.
You're completely alone in a dark room. You have nowhere, not even like, forget about being completely alone. You're in a dark room, meaning you have nowhere external for your consciousness to attach onto. Even if I'm alone here with light, I can sort of look at that wall and say that's a wall. So I have external places for my mind to go. In darkness, you don't. So the point of that is to say you train a solitude because you have to build a very loving, positive, empowering relationship with yourself, which is ultimately the most important relationship that every single one of us has, right? The most, because that's the one relationship we can't escape. We're going to be with ourselves 24/7, all day, every day until death. So it's taken a lot of training to get to this point, to build that empowering relationship with myself that I love who I am, that who I am today. And it wasn't always like this, of course. So that's part of it. And then even training, when I go out, like the other day, I went out for 8 hours of tire dragging. 8 hours of dragging two heavy ass tires in the middle of the night. So I intentionally did it at night because there was nobody in the park. I was like at 2 a.m. or something, nobody in the park. And I wasn't listening to music or anything. So I'm just with my own thoughts. And it's a slow, tedious, mind-numbingly fucking miserable exercise, dragging tires. But by being with my thoughts, by being with myself, I'm training myself to navigate that in what will inevitably be the most demanding expedition of my life and stretching the very boundaries of human endurance. So to me, and a big reason why is also to navigate the solitude, is to come closer to, everybody's got their own version of what this word means, but to come closer to God, and only in the complete silence of that, you get to experience the divine in a way that you can't anywhere else.
Dude, that's so beautifully said. How are you going to top that? How are you going to push this even more? Is it the jungle? Is it like living underwater for 100 days in the ocean? Like, that's what I was thinking about. And Aaron and I were going home that night. We had dinner with you, and I was like, "How is he going to top that shit?" And Aaron said, "I don't know if he needs to top it." And I said, "No, dude, the way his brain processes, it's not a one-up thing. It's what else is possible?
Yeah.
What else am I capable of?" And I think that's an entrepreneurial thought process. Anyway,
Totally.
like, well, if I did that and I was scared of it, well, what about now?
Yeah.
So, dude, I applaud you, man. I admire you. Like, I think you are a real serious man on purpose. And tell everybody real quick where they can get your book, Fearvana, and just whatever you want to say about it. And then I'm gonna put this episode through as fast as possible because I want people to hear this, man. This has been really eye-opening.
Honored, brother. You can find me at fearvana.com. That's FEARVANA. I'm actually going to be having a live tracker on my expeditions. You can kind of follow along. I have the whole darkness journal from my time at the darkness retreat up there as well. Just a week ago, shared it very authentically and vulnerably. I was a little nervous about sharing it, but I hope it makes a difference. That's why I shared it. So you can find me at fearvana.com. Instagram is my most popular platform, Fearvana. And the book is available on Amazon in Audible, Kindle, paperback. 100% of the profits go to charity. So we support survivors of sex trafficking, to former child soldiers, and many causes all over the globe. So all the profits in the book go to support many beautiful causes as well.
Dude, this is awesome. Thank you so much for doing this so quickly, by the way. Like, we squeezed you in before you left for Antarctica.
I know. I'm glad we got to connect before likewise, man. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah. And I wish you the absolute best on your journey this time. And I'll talk to you when you get back, and then we'll prep for the next big journey. But dude, just thank you so much for what you're doing for the world, and like pushing yourself to encourage other men to not give up on this like beautiful life that can be created from the darkness that they're experiencing now. It's just a really awesome thing you're doing, man. I support you 100%.
Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah. All right, audience. Go rewind this one. Take more notes, because I Akshay talks faster than I do. So.
I do talk fast, indeed.
Everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. Go check out fearvana.com. Go to Akshay's Instagram page at Fearvana. Like, this dude is super interesting. And if you need some motivation, it will be it. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.